eating disorders are not taken seriously always in our culture. And how deadly they are is not understood by most people. It's important to realize that like eating disorder is a serious situation.
Kate, in your opinion, what are the leading emotional barriers for people engaging in treatment?
I would say fear. I think fear is the leading emotional barrier. And if you think about it, someone's eating disorder has really been their life vest, right? It's been their coping mechanism. It's been a destructive one, but it's certainly been something that they've relied on to survive. So we know eating disorders aren't really about food, right? They're really more about internal emotional distress that just kind of looks on the surface like it's about food. And so then when they enter treatment and we say, hand over your life vest, I think that can be pretty terrifying. So now they have to maybe acknowledge or confront or work through some of those internal distressing things going on, like unresolved trauma or grief or anxiety. And that can be pretty terrifying, especially if you don't know how to swim.
Right. What are some common misconceptions about eating disorder treatment?
I think that you're going to go into treatment and you are going to lose all control and people are going to tell you what to do, and that you are really, just going to be like a prisoner. Where I think it's important to let people know in the beginning that treatment is collaborative. That especially in our treatment centers, we work with our clients to design treatment goals and treatment plans that are part of what the client wants for their life too, and for their treatment as well. The other misconception I feel like happens a lot, and this happens often when I'm talking to parents too, is that going to treatment, going to a residential center or even a partial hospital, that somehow that treatment is a destination. Where it would be great if everybody who went to treatment came out on the other side and check the box with all better now, right? But that's not the case, and that's not what we know typically happens. Instead, I think it's important to educate our clients and their families that going to treatment is really just part of the process. It's just a stop along the way to their destination of recovery. And with that in mind, I think people really end up with the right attitude coming in and understand how important it is to continue getting support once they discharge or step out of treatment.
What are people not talking about as it relates to eating disorders and eating disorder treatment?
I don't think people are talking about the shame. I think that for so long there's this resistance to acknowledging that the eating disorder is part of someone's life, or even convincing yourself and your loved ones that nothing is wrong, that having to acknowledge that the eating disorder has encompassed your life, eclipsed a lot of the joy in your life, and that you need more support than what you have. I think people can feel that sense of failure, which of course, from the other side, we're looking at it as not a failure, but instead an opportunity to put yourself first and to be brave and to do the hard thing of searching for recovery. But I think that initial piece of shame of somehow you failed at your eating disorder is something that we need to talk about from the outset, and might be able to help people feel better about taking that step towards treatment.
So what are some things that someone may say that could trigger us to think like, maybe I need some help?
I advise loved ones to really focus on feelings and not food. Right? So I think that people's natural reaction would be to point out this relationship that's not really working out with food with the person, where instead the focus can be on, hey, loved one, you really don't seem like yourself recently, or I've noticed that your anxiety seems to be higher than normal, or just I miss you and the time that we would spend together. And focusing on those areas and really highlighting some of the things that the eating disorder takes away from relationships might be better than, might get less of resistance from the client or from the individual who's struggling.
What are maybe some examples of breaking points that you've seen in people who have finally decided it's time?
And again, I think this goes back to the individual. I would say mostly, it's some sort of crisis that has happened. And often with eating disorders, it's a medical crisis. So maybe we've gotten to the point where there's some medical instability. Maybe there's some abnormal lab values. Maybe there's a standard or routine visit to a doctor who says, something's not quite right with what things look like last time you were here. And that often can be a breaking point. And then also, again, I think, losing the things that you love, right? Like if you want to do something with your life and you're in school to do that and you can't function at school, that's often a breaking point for people. It's taken too much for me. It's time for a change.
What is your why?
What happens when the lights come back on for somebody? So often when the client comes to treatment, it's because they're in crisis, right? And it's because something has broken the dam or they've reached some sort of breaking point. And by the time they get, into our care, or they're sitting across from me telling me what's going on, the eating disorder has really taken over. And who they are, their value system, and the light that's in their eyes isn't always there. And as they go through treatment, as they participate maybe in one of our programs, or really engage in their care, eventually, and this is hopefully they get more nourished, right? And eventually it's the lights come back on. And it's like they wake up. And sometimes it almost feels like overnight. Like I'll be talking to a client one day and then the next day there's something happening where they're alive again. And suddenly their personality is shining through. Maybe they have a wicked sense of humor that I had no idea was there. But there's life again. And being able to pay witness to that feels like an incredible privilege and makes it easy to get up and do this every day.
What truths are helpful when someone is showing a lot of emotional barriers to engaging in treatment?
So I hope this doesn't sound cliche, but what I like to tell people, whether it's a client or it's a parent, is it's not your fault. That as our understanding of eating disorders and the development of eating disorders continues to increase with more and more research and more understanding of our brain, it's clear that eating disorders are biologically based, that there's a genetic component, and that you can do the most bang up job as a parent, right? And you still might not be able to prevent your kid from having an eating disorder. And the truth is, if you walk around feeling like you're to blame, or you could have done something different, or if you're the individual and you think, well, I'm defective, there's just something wrong with me, that is time and energy that's getting taken away that could be focused on recovery.
What about parents? You mentioned parents. So what are some other truths specific to parents that might help them say, yes, it's time to go ahead and take my kiddo?
Yes. So always start with, you did not cause this eating disorder.
Yeah.
Maybe later we can talk about how some of your beliefs about diet culture have contributed to sustaining the problem, right? And that is a real conversation that we might want to have. But it is not possible for you to have caused this eating disorder. So once we get through that truth, then we address, I think, this belief that parents have that they should be able to help their child, right? Your child gets sick, they have a cold, you put some Vicks rub under their nose, right? And feed them some soup and tuck them in, and their kid's all better. But this is more complicated than that. And this takes a larger team, and it takes people who have specific professional experience and education to address these issues, especially when it progresses. And sometimes the truth is, for parents, that you are not capable of providing the support that your kid requires to get better. So supporting them and helping them means bringing them to a higher level of care.
Right. We do think of ourselves as experts in our children, and of course we are in many ways, yet when it comes to eating disorder care, there does seem to be a stronger barrier between seeking the professional help that is needed compared to, if we're looking to advance our child's sport, we look to the coach, or if there's a medical issue, we look to the doctor. But the eating disorder, because it is so pervasive, like you said, we do as parents oftentimes think that we can.
And that's such a good point. That's such a good point, because eating disorders are not taken seriously always in our culture.
Right.
And how deadly they are is not understood by most people, right? We know that a person dies from an eating disorder every 52 minutes, right? We know that you're at a much higher risk for suicide if you have an eating disorder. We know these things, but often people out there don't know that. And so I think that this idea that someone needs a specialist to get better is unknown or falls through the cracks. And so, I tell parents, like, if your kid has appendicitis, right? Like, you're not going to take the appendix out. You're going to get a surgeon and probably an anesthesiologist and, probably follow-up care, right? That's not you, parent. Like, those are people who are highly trained. But you are going to recognize that there's a problem, take them to the emergency room, get them the best care that they can have, right? That's what you can do as a parent. And it's important to realize that, like, eating disorder is a serious situation, just like appendicitis.
Kate, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and just real life experiences over the many, many years you've been working with people. If someone is out there listening and considering treatment, but might be feeling the fear and the shame and all of the reasons why not, or parent, what would you say to them?
I would say don't wait. If you feel like something's wrong, do something about it. And if you don't know what to do, go get some more information. Right? Go get some data. Go understand what the options are, and then move forward with getting the care that your kid needs.